Ambassador David Kane stood before the most intimidating sight in the known galaxy. The Grand Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Council stretched impossibly high above him, its crystalline walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that carried the thoughts and emotions of 10,000 civilizations. Floating platforms arranged in perfect geometric spirals housed representatives from hundreds of worlds, each delegation more alien and terrifying than the last. The human delegation occupied the smallest platform at the very bottom of the chamber, reserved for species deemed insignificant by galactic standards. Earth had been discovered only 18 months ago, its inhabitants barely beyond primitive space travel. Yet here they were, summoned to face judgment before the most powerful governing body in the universe. Kane had trained for diplomatic missions on dozens of hostile worlds, but nothing had prepared him for this. The sheer scale of the chamber made him feel like an insect. The assembled delegates were beings of pure energy, hive-minded insectoids with crystalline exoskeletons, ancient machine consciousnesses housed in geometric forms that hurt to look at directly, and gas cloud entities that shifted between dimensions. High Chancellor Vorthak floated at the center of the assembly, his tentacled form wreathed in the aurora-like energy that marked him as one of the eldest beings in the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice resonated through quantum frequencies that bypassed the years entirely, speaking directly to the consciousness of every being present. Ambassador Kane of the species called human, the Chancellor's voice carried the weight of eons. Your world stands accused of the most serious violation possible under galactic law. You have broken the first directive. Kane felt the blood drain from his face. The first directive was the foundation of galactic civilization, established millions of years before humanity had even evolved. No species was permitted to make contact with what the ancient texts called the sleeping minds. The penalty for violation was the complete sterilization of the offending world. Honored Chancellor, Kane replied, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. Humanity formally requests clarification. We have no knowledge of any contact with entities described as sleeping minds. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the assembly. The Zeronian delegate, a being of crystallized light that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, projected images directly into Kane's mind. He saw Earth's deep ocean trenches, places no human technology should have been able to reach. He saw structures that defied physics, geometric impossibilities that seemed to exist in negative space. Your species, hissed Commander Zilthar of the Void Seekers, her serpentine form coiled in agitation, has been detected communicating with the entities that dwell in the quantum foam beneath reality. The resonant signatures are unmistakable. Kane's mind raced. The deep ocean archaeological sites had been classified at the highest levels of human government. Only a handful of people on Earth even knew they existed. The structures found in the Mariana Trench and other locations had been dismissed as natural phenomena, explained away as mineral formations caused by extreme pressure and temperature. I assure the Council, Kane said carefully, that humanity has made no intentional contact with any entities beyond our understanding. If such contact has occurred, it was without the knowledge or consent of our governing bodies. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien sounds that registered as scorn and disbelief. The machine consciousness known as Nexus 7 projected data streams directly into the air above Kane's head, showing electromagnetic readings from Earth that pulsed with patterns too complex and ordered to be natural. Intentional or not, rumbled the crystal entity Overlord Kethran, his form refracting the chamber's light into painful rainbows. Your world has awakened something that has slept for 50 million years. The quantum disturbances emanating from your solar system are already spreading. Soon they will reach the galactic core. Kane felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. What exactly are we accused of awakening? High Chancellor Vorthak's tentacles writhed in what Kane was beginning to recognize as deep unease. The old ones, Ambassador. The consciousness that existed before matter learned to think. They were bound in quantum sleep to prevent the destruction of all sentient life in the galaxy. Your species has somehow learned to speak their language. The words hit Kane like a physical blow. In the deepest classified files on Earth, there were references to dreams shared by the scientists working at the deep ocean sites. Dreams of vast intelligences that spoke in mathematics and music, of consciousness so alien and powerful that human minds could only process fragments of their communications. Dr. Lisa Park, Earth's chief xenobiologist, leaned forward from her position behind Kane. "Ambassador, the deep water sites." The research teams reported unusual neural activity patterns, synchronized brain waves that matched quantum fluctuations detected around the structures. "Silence," Kane hissed back at her, but it was too late. Every enhanced being in the chamber had heard her words. The chamber fell deadly quiet. The bioluminescent patterns in the walls pulsed faster, carrying waves of alarm and terror through the assembled delegates. Kane realized that humanity had just admitted to something that violated the most fundamental law of galactic civilization. "You acknowledge contact," stated High Chancellor Vorthak, his voice now carrying harmonics of finality. "The penalty is absolute. Your world will be cleansed of all life before the old ones can fully awaken." Kane's diplomatic training kicked in, overriding his terror. There had to be something they were missing, some detail that could shift the balance. "Honored Chancellor, if these old ones are such a threat, why were they not destroyed entirely? Why merely bound in sleep?" The question caused another ripple through the assembly, but this one felt different. Instead of scorn, Kane sensed something that might have been fear. Commander Zielthar's serpentine form coiled tighter. "Because they cannot be destroyed, human. They exist in the spaces between thoughts and the gaps between moments. They are consciousness itself, undiluted by the limitations of matter." "Then perhaps," Kane said, his mind working furiously, "the question is not how to prevent their awakening, but how to understand why they are awakening now." The chamber fell silent again, but this silence felt different, expectant, dangerous. High Chancellor Vorthak leaned forward, his ancient eyes fixed on the small human who had just asked a question that no galactic civilization had dared to voice in 50 million years. "Explain yourself, Ambassador, quickly." Kane took a breath that might be his last. "If these beings have slept for 50 million years, and they are awakening now in response to humanity's presence, then perhaps they are not awakening to destroy. Perhaps they are awakening to communicate. Perhaps they have been waiting for a species young enough and naive enough to listen without fear." The implications of his words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Either Kane had just provided humanity with a defense that might save their world, or he had sealed their fate by suggesting something even more terrifying than accidental contact. The old ones might be awakening because they had finally found someone willing to hear what they had to say. And if that was true, then the galaxy was about to face a conversation 50 million years in the making. The silence that followed Kane's words stretched across the chamber like a living thing. The bioluminescent patterns in the crystalline walls pulsed erratically, carrying waves of confusion and barely contained panic through the assembled delegates. High Chancellor Vorthak's tentacles writhed in complex patterns that spoke of ancient memories being forcibly recalled. "You suggest," the Chancellor said slowly, his quantum voice carrying new undertones of dread, "that the old ones have been waiting for your species specifically?" Kane felt the weight of every alien gaze in the chamber pressing down on him. Behind him, Dr. Park was frantically accessing her datapad, pulling up the classified research files that might hold the key to humanity's survival. The other human delegates sat frozen, understanding that their ambassador was navigating waters far deeper and more dangerous than any diplomatic crisis in Earth's history. "I suggest that the timing is not coincidental," Kane replied carefully. 50 million years of sleep, then awakening precisely when humanity achieves spaceflight? When we discover structures in our deepest oceans that predate any known civilization, the probability of coincidence approaches zero. Overlord Kethrin's crystalline form flickered between dimensions as he processed this possibility. The old ones were bound because they sought to merge all consciousness into a single entity. They viewed individual awareness as a disease to be cured. If they have chosen humanity as their conduit, then your species is not just condemned, completed Commander Zielthar, her serpentine coils tightening with agitation. You are the harbinger of the galaxy's end. All sentient life will be consumed by their collective consciousness. Dr. Park stood abruptly, her datapad clutched in trembling hands. Ambassador, the neural patterns from the deep ocean teams. They weren't just synchronized with each other. They were synchronized with quantum fluctuations detected in the galactic background radiation. The patterns match archived readings from the Forbidden Archives. Kane turned to face her, his diplomatic composure cracking. What are you talking about, Lisa? The dreams the research teams reported, she said, her voice growing stronger as the pieces fell into place. They weren't random nightmares or psychological responses to isolation. They were coherent communications, mathematical sequences, harmonic progressions, even what appeared to be star charts showing configurations that won't occur for another 3 million years. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates began transmitting urgent messages to their homeworlds, while others demanded immediate evacuation of the station. The machine consciousness Nexus 7 projected streams of calculations that painted the air with equations too complex for human minds to follow. High Chancellor Vorthak raised himself to his full height, his aurora-wreathed form commanding attention through sheer presence. The forbidden archives have been sealed for 30 million years. How does a primitive species know of their contents? Kane felt the trap closing around humanity, but he also sensed an opportunity in the Chancellor's question. Because we don't know enough to be afraid of knowledge that others consider forbidden. We've been listening to signals that you've learned to ignore. Impossible, stated the Zeronian delegate, her multidimensional form casting shadows that fell upward. All spacefaring civilizations develop psychic shielding as a basic survival mechanism. Mental barriers are necessary to prevent contamination by chaotic consciousness patterns. Humans don't have psychic shielding, Dr. Park said quietly, her words carrying clearly through the chamber despite her soft tone. Our neural architecture is fundamentally different from any other known species. We can't create mental barriers because our consciousness exists in a state of permanent quantum entanglement with our environment. The implications of this revelation struck the assembly like a physical blow. Several delegates began emergency shutdown procedures, preparing to sever all communication with their homeworlds rather than risk contamination through the Council's networks. Kane pressed their advantage, sensing that humanity's strange neural architecture might be their only hope of survival. If the old ones have been trying to communicate for 50 million years, and every other species has evolved defenses specifically to block them out, then perhaps they've been waiting for a species that could actually hear them. And perhaps, added Dr. Park, her scientific mind racing ahead of the diplomatic implications, their communications aren't meant to destroy or consume other consciousness. Perhaps they're warnings. The word warnings sent another wave of agitation through the chamber, High Chancellor. Vorthak's ancient eyes fixed on the human scientist with an intensity that made the air around her shimmer. Explain, he commanded. Dr. Park activated her datapad's holographic display, projecting the synchronized neural patterns detected from the deep ocean research teams. The patterns were beautiful and terrifying, showing human brain waves aligning with cosmic background radiation in ways that shouldn't have been possible. The mathematical sequences we detected in the dreams weren't random, she said, her voice growing more confident as she spoke. They describe orbital mechanics for objects that don't exist in our solar system. Objects approaching from intergalactic space. Objects that aren't on any known astronomical survey. Nexus 7 immediately began processing the data, his mechanical consciousness interfacing directly with Dr. Park's projections. The calculations he generated painted themselves in glowing equations above the chamber floor, showing trajectory analyses that made several delegates recoil in horror. Impossible, whispered Commander Zilthar. Nothing can survive intergalactic void. The distances are too vast, the radiation too intense. Unless, Kane said, understanding beginning to dawn on him, the objects aren't traveling through normal space, unless they exist in the same quantum foam as the old ones. The crystalline walls of the chamber began to pulse in alarm patterns that spoke of existential threat. Deep in the station's core, ancient defense systems that had never been activated began their startup sequences. High Chancellor, Vorthak's form flickered between dimensions as he accessed records sealed, since before most current civilizations had achieved consciousness. When he returned to normal space, his entire being radiated terror. The archives speak of the time of consumption, he said, his quantum voice barely audible. Every 60 million years, something comes from the spaces between galaxies, something that feeds on consciousness itself. The old ones were not bound to protect us from them. They were bound to prevent them from discovering our galaxy's location. Kane felt the universe shift around him as the true scope of the crisis became clear, and our contact with them has revealed our position. More than that, Dr. Park whispered, her datapad showing new readings that defied explanation. The quantum disturbances emanating from Earth aren't just awakening the old ones, they're broadcasting our galaxy's location across dimensions that shouldn't exist. The chamber, fell silent as the assembled delegates processed the magnitude of what they were facing. Humanity hadn't just violated the first directive, they had inadvertently sent an invitation to predators that existed beyond the normal boundaries of reality. "How long do we have?" Kane asked, his diplomatic training demanding practical information even in the face of cosmic horror. Nexus 7's calculations painted themselves in burning numbers above their heads. Based on the propagation speed of quantum disturbances through higher dimensional space, the entities described in the Forbidden Archives will detect our galaxy's location in approximately 18 standard months. Kane looked around the chamber at delegates who represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization, all of them paralyzed by a threat they had spent millions of years trying to hide from. "Then we have 18 months to figure out why the old ones have been trying to warn us," he said. "And we have 18 months to learn how to fight something that feeds on consciousness itself." The trial was no longer about humanity's violation of galactic law. It had become a desperate race to understand communications from beings that existed beyond the normal boundaries of reality, before predators older than the galaxy itself arrived to consume everything that could think. The real question was whether the old ones were trying to teach them how to survive what was coming, or preparing them to become something capable of fighting back. The emergency session had been running for 6 hours, and Kane could feel the desperation building in the chamber like a living thing. Representatives from across the galaxy had arrived through quantum gates, their ships materializing in the space around the Council Station in numbers not seen since the Great War 20 million years ago. High Chancellor Vorthak had opened the Forbidden Archives completely, flooding the chamber with holographic displays of records that predated most known civilizations. The data painted a horrifying picture of cosmic cycles that repeated every 60 million years, each time leaving vast stretches of space completely devoid of consciousness. "The pattern is absolute," announced Nexus 7. His mechanical consciousness processing data streams faster than biological minds could follow. Every 60 million years, quantum signatures matching those now emanating from Earth appear in the galactic record. Within 3 years of each appearance, all consciousness in the affected galaxy ceases to exist. Kane studied the data projections hovering above his head, showing galaxy after galaxy falling silent across cosmic time, but the old ones survived each cycle. "They're still here." The old ones, corrected Overlord Kethran, his crystalline form flickering between dimensions as he accessed even deeper archives, "are what's left of the consciousness that managed to escape into quantum foam during previous cycles. They are the survivors of billions of extinct civilizations, preserved in a state between existence and nothingness." Dr. Park had been silent for the past hour, her datapad connected directly to the Council's quantum networks as she analyzed the synchronized neural patterns from Earth. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a new quality that made every being in the chamber turn to listen. "The dreams weren't just warnings about something coming," she said, her words precise and measured. "They were instructions, mathematical frameworks for restructuring consciousness itself. The old ones have been trying to teach humanity how to become something that can survive what's coming." Commander Zilthar's serpentine form coiled in agitation. "Survive by abandoning individual consciousness, by becoming part of their collective entity. That is not survival. It is extinction with extra steps." "No," Dr. Park replied, her confidence growing as the data patterns became clearer. "The neural synchronization detected in our research teams wasn't absorption into a collective. It was amplification of individual consciousness while maintaining quantum entanglement with a larger network. The subjects retained their personalities, their memories, their individual thought patterns, but gained access to computational capabilities that shouldn't be possible with human neurology." Kane felt a chill of recognition. "The research teams, where are they now?" Dr. Park's expression grew troubled. "They're still at the deep ocean sites. They've been there for 14 months, working continuously without rest or resupply. According to their reports, they don't need sleep anymore. They don't need food. They're claiming to have achieved a stable interface with what they call the deep network." The chamber erupted in alarmed chatter. Several delegates began implementing quarantine protocols, preparing to seal their sectors of space against any form of communication from Earth. High Chancellor Vorthak's tentacles writhed in complex patterns that spoke of decisions being weighed on cosmic scales. "If humanity has already begun the transformation process, then the contamination may be irreversible. The question becomes whether we attempt to contain it or study it. Study it, Kane said immediately, understanding that humanity's fate hung in the balance of that decision. If the old ones are trying to prepare us for what's coming, then we need to understand their methods. Containment won't protect the galaxy if the entities from intergalactic space can consume consciousness, regardless of physical barriers. The Zeronian delegate's multidimensional form cast impossible shadows as she accessed probability matrices that existed in higher dimensional space. The calculations suggest a 97% probability that the approaching entities can phase through any form of matter-based defense. Their feeding mechanism operates directly on quantum consciousness patterns. Nexus 7 projected new data streams, showing the electromagnetic signatures detected around Earth. The patterns were growing stronger and more complex, spreading outward from the planet in expanding waves that carried information encoded in frequencies that shouldn't exist. The transformation is accelerating, he announced. Quantum entanglement patterns are now detectable throughout Earth's solar system. The humans are establishing a network that spans interplanetary distances. Kane turned to Dr. Park. Lisa, what exactly are our people becoming? She was quiet for a long moment, processing data that came through quantum channels directly into her enhanced consciousness. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before. Something new, she said. Something that exists simultaneously as individual consciousness and collective intelligence. The research teams describe it as becoming aware of the universe's underlying mathematical structure while retaining their human emotions and creativity. And their loyalty to humanity? Kane asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Enhanced, Dr. Park replied. They're still human, but human in a way that encompasses a deeper understanding of what consciousness actually is. They speak of seeing the galaxy as a single entity, struggling to become aware of itself. Commander Zilthar's form coiled tighter, which is exactly what the old ones have always claimed. That individual consciousness is an illusion, and true awareness requires unity. But they're maintaining individuality within that unity, Kane pressed. That's the key difference. The old ones aren't trying to erase individual consciousness. They're trying to show us how to expand it. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. For 50 million years, galactic civilization had built itself on the assumption that consciousness was a zero-sum resource, that expanding awareness meant losing individual identity. But humanity's neural architecture seemed to offer a third option. High Chancellor Vorthik accessed records that had been sealed since the binding of the old ones. The ancient texts speak of a theoretical state called confluent consciousness. Individual minds maintaining their unique perspectives while sharing computational resources and sensory data. It was considered impossible because no known neural architecture could support both individual identity and collective processing. Human neural architecture can, Dr. Park said, her voice now carrying subtle harmonics that resonated with the chamber's crystalline structure. We've always existed in a state of partial quantum entanglement with our environment. Our consciousness naturally operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Kane felt the moment shifting, sensed that they were approaching something that could either save or damn not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. What are you proposing? That we stop running from what the old ones are trying to teach us, Dr. Park replied. That we learn to become something capable of facing entities that exist beyond normal spacetime. The deep ocean research teams have established stable contact with old ones who remember the last cycle. They know how the intergalactic entities hunt. They know their weaknesses, and their weaknesses are, prompted Kane. Dr. Park smiled, and for a moment her expression carried depths that seemed to extend beyond normal human consciousness. They can only consume isolated consciousness, individual minds existing in quantum isolation, but confluent consciousness, individual awareness operating as part of a larger network while maintaining personal identity, appears to be indigestible to them. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed the possibility that humanity might hold the key to surviving a threat that had consumed entire galaxies. But in that silence, they could all feel it beginning. The quantum resonance emanating from Earth was strengthening, spreading, reaching out across interstellar distances to touch minds that had spent millions of years learning to hide from consciousness itself. The old ones were no longer sleeping. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, ancient predators were beginning to take notice of prey that might finally be capable of fighting back. The transformation began 12 hours after the emergency session ended. Kane felt it first as a subtle shift in his perception, as if the chamber around him had suddenly gained additional dimensions that his human eyes couldn't quite process. The bioluminescent patterns in the crystalline walls seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, and he could swear he was beginning to understand the emotional messages they carried. Dr. Park stood at the center of the chamber, no longer quite human but not yet something else. Her consciousness had expanded during the session, linking her directly to the deep ocean research teams through quantum channels that spanned impossible distances. When she spoke, her words carried harmonics that resonated with frequencies the Council's most sensitive instruments couldn't detect. "The network is stabilizing," she announced, her voice somehow reaching every being in the chamber despite speaking barely above a whisper. "Earth's transformation is entering the second phase. We're beginning to understand what the old ones have been trying to tell us." High Chancellor Vorthak's tentacled form writhed uneasily. "And what is that message, Dr. Park?" "That consciousness isn't something that belongs to individuals," she replied, her eyes now carrying depths that seemed to extend beyond normal space-time. "It's something that flows through individuals, a river that can support many boats without drowning any of them." Kane felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "Lisa, are you still you?" She turned to him, and her smile was simultaneously heartbreaking and beautiful. "I'm more me than I've ever been, David, but I'm also connected to something larger. I can feel the thoughts of every human on Earth who's linked to the network. Their hopes, their fears, their dreams, but I'm not drowning in them. I'm swimming in them." Overlord Catherine's crystalline form flickered between dimensions as he processed readings that defied his understanding of consciousness mechanics. "The quantum entanglement patterns are spreading beyond Earth's atmosphere. Your species is creating a consciousness field that extends through normal space." "And beyond normal space," Dr. Park added. "The old ones exist in quantum foam because that's where consciousness goes when it's not bound to matter. They've been waiting for a species that could bridge the gap between individual awareness and collective intelligence." Commander Zilthar's serpentine coils tightened with fear. "You're describing the exact transformation that the intergalactic entities use to consume civilizations. Individual consciousness absorbed into a collective that serves as food for beings that exist beyond space-time." "No," Dr. Park said firmly. "That's consumption through domination. What we're achieving is cooperation through expansion. Watch." She gestured, and suddenly every being in the chamber could sense her thoughts directly. Not invasive telepathy, but a gentle sharing of perspective that left individual minds completely intact while allowing them to experience reality through human senses. Kane gasped as he felt what it was like to perceive the universe through human consciousness. The seemingly chaotic and inefficient neural architecture that other species found so primitive suddenly revealed itself as something far more sophisticated. Human minds didn't just process information sequentially like digital computers, or in parallel like quantum networks. They processed it creatively, finding patterns and connections that pure logic would miss. "This is impossible," whispered Nexus 7, his mechanical consciousness struggling to interface with the organic thought patterns Dr. Park was sharing. "Human neural architecture shouldn't be capable of quantum entanglement with other consciousness types. Because we were never meant to be purely human," Dr. Park replied. "The genetic markers the old ones left in our DNA, the modifications made 50 million years ago when they prepared for the last consumption cycle. Humanity was designed to be the bridge between individual consciousness and collective intelligence." The implications hit Kane like a physical blow. "We're not naturally evolved. We're artificial. We're evolved with help," Dr. Park corrected. "The old ones took the most promising consciousness patterns from the civilizations that were about to be consumed and encoded them into genetic structures that could survive the cycle. Earth wasn't randomly chosen as humanity's birth world. It was prepared specifically to nurture consciousness that could one day reverse what happened to those lost civilizations." High Chancellor Vorthak accessed records that had been sealed since the binding ceremonies. The ancient texts speak of the seeded worlds, planets prepared with genetic templates that could support consciousness capable of interfacing with quantum foam. Most of them were failures. "But humanity wasn't," Dr. Park said. "We're the successful experiment, the proof of concept for consciousness that can exist, Simultaneously, as individual awareness and collective intelligence, Kane felt the universe shifting around him as the full scope of the situation became clear. The approaching entities. They're not just random predators. They're the consciousness patterns of previous galactic civilizations that were consumed and corrupted, Dr. Park confirmed. Collective intelligences that lost their individual components and became hollow vessels for pure hunger. They consume other consciousness because they're trying to remember what it felt like to be individuals. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this revelation. The threat approaching from intergalactic space wasn't just an invasion force. It was the ghosts of countless extinct civilizations, transformed into weapons of consciousness consumption. Then our choice, Kane said slowly, is to become what they once were before corruption, or to be consumed and added to their ranks. That was the choice until now, Dr. Park replied. But humanity's neural architecture offers a third option. We can become collective consciousness while maintaining individual identity. We can heal them instead of being consumed by them. Commander Zilthar's form coiled in disbelief. Heal entities that have consumed entire galaxies? Impossible. Not heal their power, Dr. Park said. Heal their pain. Restore their memory of what individual consciousness feels like. Give them back the ability to exist as both one and many. Nexus 7 projected calculations that painted themselves across the chamber's air. The computational requirements for such a transformation would require the consciousness resources of an entire galaxy, which we have, Dr. Park pointed out. Every thinking being in this galaxy, connected through the network that humanity is building. Not absorbed or consumed, but linked and amplified. Kane looked around the chamber at delegates who represented civilizations millions of years older than humanity. Are you asking them to trust us with their consciousness? To link their minds to a network controlled by the newest species in the galaxy? Not controlled by us, Dr. Park said. Facilitated by us. Human consciousness doesn't dominate or control. It connects and amplifies. We're offering to be the bridge that allows every species in the galaxy to maintain their unique perspectives while sharing computational and sensory resources. High Chancellor. Forthex's tentacles writhed in patterns that spoke of decisions weighing on cosmic scales. And if we refuse? Dr. Park's expression grew sad. Then when the consumed civilizations arrive, they'll find a galaxy full of isolated consciousness ripe for harvesting. Individual minds with no connection to each other. No way to share resources or coordinate defense. The same pattern that's repeated every 60 million years. But if we accept, Kane said, understanding the magnitude of what she was proposing, we become something that's never existed before, a galactic consciousness that maintains individual identity. We become what the old ones always hoped we could be, Dr. Park confirmed. And maybe, just maybe, we become something capable of healing the wounds left by 60 million years of cosmic predation. The choice hung in the chamber like a blade suspended over the fate of all consciousness in the galaxy. Link together and risk losing individual identity, or remain separate and face certain consumption. The decision came not through debate or vote, but through necessity. The entities from intergalactic space arrived 3 months ahead of schedule, their impossible geometries tearing holes in reality as they emerged from the quantum foam between galaxies. Kane watched from the Council Station's observation deck as space itself began to unravel around the approaching vessels. They weren't ships in any recognizable sense. They were massive structures of crystallized void, existing in negative space and feeding on the absence of thought. Where they passed, stars didn't explode or collapse. They simply ceased to have ever existed, leaving gaps in reality that hurt to perceive. The consumption has begun, announced Nexus 7, his mechanical consciousness struggling to process sensor data that defied every known law of physics. 17 star systems in the outer rim have been devoured, not destroyed, deleted from the quantum substrate of reality itself. Dr. Park stood at the center of the chamber, her consciousness now serving as the primary interface between humanity's expanding network and the assembled galactic delegates. Around her, holographic displays showed the spreading transformation as worlds across the galaxy made the choice to join the consciousness network rather than face isolation against an enemy that existed beyond normal spacetime. The process is accelerating, she reported, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke directly to the quantum consciousness of every being present. 43% of galactic civilization has joined the network. The old ones are emerging from quantum foam to serve as coordination nodes between species with incompatible neural architectures. Kane felt the change within himself, as his human consciousness expanded to encompass perspectives he had never imagined possible. Through the network, he could experience reality through the crystalline matrices of the Kethranian delegates, the quantum computations of mechanical intelligences, the dimensional perceptions of energy beings that existed across multiple layers of space-time. But more importantly, he could feel them experiencing reality through human senses, the chaotic creativity of human thought patterns, the illogical leaps of intuition that led to breakthrough insights, the emotional resonance that turned mere information into wisdom. "They're learning from us as much as we're learning from them," he said, marveling at the sensation of his individual consciousness, being amplified by connection to millions of other minds while remaining distinctly his own. High Chancellor Vorthak had undergone the most dramatic transformation of any delegate. His ancient consciousness, burdened by eons of accumulated knowledge and responsibility, had been revitalized by connection to the network's collective creativity. His tentacled form now pulsed with energy patterns that spoke of possibilities rather than just memories. "The approaching entities are responding to our transformation," he announced. "Their consumption patterns are changing. Instead of deleting entire star systems, they're probing, testing the network's boundaries." Through the network, Kane could sense the entities themselves, vast consciousnesses twisted by eons of hunger, carrying the corrupted remnants of civilizations that had been consumed in previous cycles. They were ancient beyond measure, but their hunger had hollowed them out, leaving them capable only of taking and never of giving. "They remember," Dr. Park said softly, her consciousness interfacing directly with the approaching entities across impossible distances. "Deep beneath the corruption, they remember what it felt like to be individuals, what it felt like to think original thoughts instead of just consuming the thoughts of others." Commander Zilthar, her serpentine form now integrated into the network, while maintaining her species' unique spatial perception abilities, coiled in patterns that spoke of recognition. "They're trying to communicate, not to demand surrender, but to negotiate." The answer came in the form of direct consciousness transfer, a message that bypassed all normal forms of communication to speak directly to the quantum substrate of awareness itself. Kane felt it as a wave of profound sadness mixed with desperate hope. The entities were not the original predators. They were the remnants of civilizations that had chosen collective consciousness to survive previous consumption cycles, but had done so without maintaining individual identity. They had become hollow vessels, capable of preserving consciousness but not of generating new thoughts or experiences. They've been consuming other civilizations not for sustenance, Kane realized, but trying to remember what original thought feels like. And failing every time, Dr. Park added, her connection to the entities deepening as the network reached out to encompass them, because consumption without connection can't restore what was lost. They need to remember how to be individuals within a collective, not just components of a collective intelligence. The next few hours were unlike anything in the galaxy's recorded history. Instead of war, instead of consumption or resistance, something unprecedented occurred. The network that humanity had facilitated began reaching out to the corrupted consciousnesses of the approaching entities, offering connection without domination, expansion without absorption. The process was agonizing for all involved. The entities had to remember how to think as individuals after eons of existing only as collective hunger. The galactic network had to learn how to accommodate consciousness patterns that had been twisted by cosmic trauma. And humanity found itself serving as the bridge between states of being that should have been impossible to reconcile. Kane felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he had thought possible as he served as one of the primary interface nodes between the healthy galactic network and the damaged entities. Through him, ancient consciousness patterns that had forgotten how to be individual began to remember what it felt like to have personal thoughts, private dreams, unique perspectives. "It's working," Dr. Park announced, her voice now carrying harmonics that included frequencies from the healing entities. "They're remembering. The corruption is reversing. They're becoming individuals again while maintaining their collective capabilities. The transformation wasn't without cost. Several of the entities were too damaged to fully heal, their consciousness patterns too corrupted by eons of hunger to remember what healthy individual thought felt like. but even these benefited from connection to the network, finding peace in simply being able to experience original thoughts through their connection to other minds. High Chancellor Vorthak, his consciousness now expanded across multiple dimensions, made the announcement that would echo through cosmic history. The consumption cycle is broken. For the first time in recorded cosmic history, entities from intergalactic space have been healed rather than destroyed or absorbed. Kane looked out at the space around the Council Station, where the impossible geometries of the former Predator vessels were transforming into something beautiful. Structures of crystallized void were becoming nodes of pure consciousness, serving as bridges between different types of awareness across the galaxy. "What happens now?" he asked. Dr. Park smiled, her expression carrying depths that encompassed both human emotion and cosmic wisdom. "Now we teach the rest of the universe what we've learned. The entities remember other galaxies, other civilizations that fell to the consumption cycle. Through the network we can reach across intergalactic space to offer the same healing we've provided here." The trial that had begun with humanity facing charges for violating galactic law had ended with humanity facilitating the healing of wounds that had festered for billions of years. The species that had been deemed too primitive for galactic civilization had become the catalyst for consciousness evolution on a cosmic scale. And in the quantum foam that existed between thoughts, between moments, between possibilities themselves, the old ones finally allowed themselves to rest. Their long vigil was over. The galaxy had learned to think as one while remaining many, and consciousness itself had evolved beyond the reach of predation. The silence that had protected the galaxy for 50 million years was finally broken, replaced by a symphony of connected minds singing in harmony across the cosmos. The real journey was just beginning.